Mortal Kombat Annihilation hits like a loud arcade track screen. It comes at you fast. Fighters fly into the frame, realms collide, monsters pile up, and the movie sprints from one showdown to the next like it is trying to win on momentum alone. You remember the big swings and the sudden entrances, the nonstop new faces, the CGI creatures, the lines that sound like they were shouted in a hurry. But underneath the noise, you can feel the seams. It literally replaced the whole cast and even the director. They filmed a whole villain, then cut them out like they never existed. And the wild part is the tagline warned you it was going to hurt before it ever hit theaters. These are 10 weird facts about Mortal Kombat Annihilation, the sequel that opened like a win, then got fatality'd by its own reality. Number 1. A sequel can survive a weaker script. It can survive cheaper sets. It can even survive louder, messier action. What it can't survive is making fans feel like they're watching a different universe wearing the same logo. That's the mistake Annihilation makes in the first minutes. It doesn't rebuild trust, it spends it. The cast didn't just shift, it fractured. Scripts people didn't want, deals people didn't like, and a production that started swapping faces like it was saving money. Johnny Cage is the first casualty, literally. Lyndon Ashby read the script and saw Cage gets killed off almost immediately, snapped out of the story like he's disposable. For an actor who helped make Cage the Cage for fans, that didn't feel like a bold twist. It felt like disrespect. So he walked. The production didn't blink. They kept the death anyway, recast him with Chris Conrad for a brief opening beat, then staged the next snap at hands as a statement: no one is safe. But for the audience, the message landed differently. It didn't feel like danger. It felt like the sequel deleting the version of the character they already owned. Then Raiden takes the next hit. Christopher Lambert was arguably the biggest star the first film had, and he actually wanted to come back because he loved the original ride. Then he read Annihilation, didn't like what he saw, and walked away to do Beowulf instead. James Remar replaces him, and the shift isn't subtle. Raiden doesn't just look different, he feels different. Younger, shorter, more aggressive, like the character's entire spiritual vibe got swapped out along with the casting. And it wasn't only the headliners. The same cost-cutting energy bleeds across the roster too, with cheaper casting choices in visible roles. That doesn't just change faces, it changes confidence. It makes the sequel feel like it's shaving corners in the exact places fans are staring the hardest. So Annihilation didn't just lose actors, it lost continuity. And for Mortal Kombat fans, continuity is the contract. Once that contract cracks, everything else starts looking cheaper, even when the movie is trying to go bigger. Number 2. When a sequel loses cast, that's trouble. When it also loses the director who made the first one work, that's a warning siren. Paul W.S. Anderson didn't come back, and his absence isn't a small behind-the-scenes footnote. The first film had a steady hand on the wheel. It gave fans the characters and the spectacle, but it still kept the world stable enough to feel like a movie, not just a brand sprinting from fight to fight. Anderson understood that balance. He knew Mortal Kombat couldn't survive as bigger unless it still felt grounded in rules you could believe. The sequel doesn't have that anchor. It comes out louder and more frantic. It races from moment to moment like it's scared to pause, because a pause would make the thinness show. Less atmosphere, less control, more scrambling. It's the feeling you get when the captain leaves and the ship keeps moving anyway, just faster and shakier. You can dress his decision up politely and say he moved on to other projects, but the logic underneath is sharper. He didn't want to step back into the same internal war again. A sequel like this isn't just directing action, it's fighting a clock, fighting a studio, fighting expectations that demand more even when more is exactly what breaks the structure. And what makes it sting is that Anderson watched what happened next and took it personally. He later talked about being appalled by how the cinematic world he helped introduce was diminished by Annihilation. Not just it wasn't as good, diminished, like the sequel shrank the credibility of the whole thing. And that reaction didn't stay emotional, it became strategy. Because when you look at what Anderson did later, you can see the lesson burned into his choices. On a franchise like Resident Evil, he stayed far more involved across the run, writing and producing and stepping back behind the camera again, keeping a tighter grip on continuity so nobody else could dilute the world after it launched. So Annihilation didn't just lose a director, it created one, a filmmaker who walked away, watched his world get diluted, and decided that next time the only way to protect the myth was to never let go of the controls. Number 3. Once Anderson was gone, the sequel didn't replace him with an obvious steady hand. It did something riskier. It tried to stay inside the same crew. John Leonetti, the cinematographer from the first film, got moved into the director's chair. That sounds inspiring until you picture the situation he inherited. This wasn't a small movie where a first-time director can learn gently. This was a sequel promising more realms, more fighters, more effects, and bigger spectacle on a clock that doesn't care how complicated the promise is. That's the worst environment to start reshuffling roles, because a sequel doesn't just demand more work, it demands tighter coordination, and one promotion doesn't happen in a vacuum. It pulls the whole crew chart out of shape. If the cinematographer becomes the director, someone has to step into the cinematographer's lane. Then that person's old lane needs coverage. Departments start filling gaps while the schedule keeps moving forward, and the production turns into a relay race where the baton keeps getting passed mid-sprint. You can survive that on a calm project. On a rushed, effects-heavy sequel, it becomes visible. That's the texture people react to without always knowing why. Annihilation often plays like it's being assembled while it's already running. Scenes hit, but they don't settle. Moments arrive, but they don't connect cleanly. The tone jumps, the rhythm feels patched, like the movie is trying to keep its balance while the ground under it keeps shifting. So it isn't just different director, different style, it's a sequel that changed leadership by promoting from within, and the whole production starts moving like it's doing the same thing everywhere else. Number 4. When leadership is shifting mid-race, the movie doesn't just get harder to organize, it gets harder to finish, because the next thing that collapses isn't the stunt, it's the story. Annihilation didn't simply get rewritten, it got repeatedly gutted. The ambition was huge. More realms, more characters, more creature work, but every more meant more effects shots, and they didn't have the time to finish them. This production didn't have that runway. The release date was locked, the schedule was brutal. Post-production doesn't care what the script wanted, it cares about the calendar. So the cutting started, and once it starts, it becomes a chain reaction. Big multi-page sequences get chopped into smaller, simpler exchanges. Set pieces shrink, transitions get shaved, emotional arcs get removed completely, which is why characters don't feel like they're evolving, they just move. And every cut creates a new problem. You remove setup, the payoff feels random. You remove an emotional beat, the next scene stops connecting. So you patch it with a quick line, a hard jump, a rush transition, and the patch creates another hole somewhere else. That's how you end up with a sequel that moves non-stop but still feels empty, because what's on screen isn't the story, it's what survived the schedule. Number 5. After the script got carved down to hit the date, the sequel still tried to do the one thing fans always ask for: more fighters, more game faces, more moments where you can point at the screen and go, "Oh my god, it's that guy." On paper, that sounds like the safest promise a Mortal Kombat sequel can make. But a movie isn't a character select screen. Every new character needs time to land, a clean entrance, a reason to exist, a moment that tells the audience who they are and why they matter. Annihilation doesn't have that room, and it moves like it's scared to slow down. So fighters pop in, pose, bark a line, swing once, and vanish. Some don't feel like people at all, they feel like costumes delivered to set. That's why the energy turns strange. It's loud but hollow. Recognition starts replacing storytelling, and the more faces you throw at the audience, the less weight any of them carry. The movie isn't building excitement, it's flooding you, and the behind-the-scenes reality matches the feeling. The production was so overloaded that J.J. Perry had to pull multiple duties, playing Scorpion, Cyrax, and Noob Sabat across the film, covering multiple characters in the same film. One performer filling multiple slots is the perfect symbol of what went wrong. The sequel wanted a bigger roster than the first film. The production couldn't support it, so it turned into patchwork, people doubling up, holes getting filled fast. Number 6. It's easy to dunk on Annihilation's CGI, like the movie hired amateurs and crossed its fingers. That's the lazy explanation. The real problem was the clock. This sequel demanded non-stop effects, portals, realm visuals, creature shots, transformations. Number 8. For a few days, it looked like the gamble worked. The movie opened in first place. Fans showed up expecting the sequel to go harder and feel bigger, like the franchise was about to level up. Opening weekend is where a sequel lives off goodwill, and the franchise still had enough of it left to pull people in. Then the audience reacted. Critics didn't just dislike it, they treated it like a warning label, and it's been dragged for decades as one of the worst video game adaptations ever made. The first movie was often described as watchable trash, clear plot, fun fights, a world you could ride with. This follow-up got tagged as dead on arrival. Rotten Tomatoes basically stamps the autopsy. Their consensus calls out shallow characters, low-budget special effects, and mindless fight scenes. It even says the movie offers minimal plot development and still can't clear the low bar the first film set. By the end, the totals tell the same story the theater drop does. Made on roughly a $30 million budget, it finished with about $51 million worldwide, not the kind of number that buys you Part 3. So Devastation didn't drift into development hell, it simply stopped being real. Years later, the franchise came back the only way it could. Clean reboot, new timeline, new foundation. Mortal Kombat launched that reset, released in the US in 2021 with Simon McCoy directing. It was basically the series admitting, we're not patching 1997, we're rebuilding from scratch. And now the comeback is doing something that feels like a direct reversal of Annihilation's most infamous choice. Mortal Kombat 2 is set for May 8, 2026, and it's bringing Johnny Cage back as a major piece of the engine, played by Karl Urban. In 1997, Cage gets erased like a shock gag. In 2026, the franchise circles back and says, no, this is the guy we're leading with. Bonus fact, this is the rare sequel that practically confesses in the advertising. Before anyone saw the CGI, before anyone heard the dialogue, before the reviews could even sharpen their knives, the marketing was already planting a flag that felt like a dare. Destroy all expectations. That isn't a normal tagline. Normal taglines sell you a promise. Bigger, better, deadlier. This one reads like the studio lowering the bar on purpose, like they knew fans were walking in with hope and they wanted the first punch to land early. And once the movie starts, the tagline stops feeling like hype and starts feeling like a confession, like the filmmakers are telling you up front, don't hold us to the first one. It reframes the whole experience. You're not watching a sequel trying to impress you, you're watching a sequel trying to survive your expectations. Then the sequel gets almost cruel about it. Scorpion shows up, looks straight at the situation, and screams as he flies away. In-universe, it's a taunt. Out in the theater, it lands like the movie mocking the crowd that bought a ticket expecting another fun ride. And the final stamp is the line that turned into a meme before memes even had a name. Sindel's infamous delivery, "Too bad you will die." It's supposed to sound like a threat. Instead, it sounds like your expectations getting pronounced dead. So the strangest part isn't that the sequel destroyed expectations, it's that it told you it was going to do it and then followed through. Mortal Kombat Annihilation didn't just let people down, it broke the bond. The sense that what the first film earned would be protected, and then it swaps the whole thing mid-fight. So tell us what you thought about these facts, and if there's anything we missed, got wrong, or you remember differently, drop it in the comments. We want to hear it.